Okay, welcome to the deep dive. You know this works. We take the source materials, you bring the articles, the notes, all that info, and we jump right in.
Yeah, we try to pull out the key stuff, the important insights, give you the context you need without you having to wade through everything yourself.
Exactly. Get you informed fast. And today, we're tackling something, well, something that really impacts what you see online every day.
Content moderation. Specifically, we're looking at recent reports suggesting some pretty big shifts in how YouTube is handling its content policies.
Right. And just to be super clear up front, this whole deep dive, everything we're discussing, it's based purely on the source materials provided.
Absolutely. This information comes from, publicly available online sources, articles, databases, websites. We've aimed for accuracy based on those, but they aren't affiliated with us personally.
We're presenting it strictly for informational purposes, to show you what's being reported.
Yep. So our mission here is to unpack what these sources say YouTube has changed, maybe touch on the why, according to the reports, and look at the potential ripple effects people are talking about.
And there's this core tension right away, isn't there? This balancing act between, free expression and trying to manage harmful stuff online.
Always. And the sources suggest platforms like YouTube are feeling a lot of pressure around that balance.
Okay, so let's get into the main change reported in these materials. It seems like something shifted, maybe somewhat quietly, starting back around December 2024.
That's what the reports indicate, yeah. And the detail that really jumps out, especially from sources citing internal training documents the New York Times apparently got hold of.
Yeah.
It's about the threshold. Like how much bad stuff can be in a video before it gets taken down.
Okay, and the number being thrown around is pretty significant. Sources say videos can now stay up even if, half of the content breaks YouTube's own rules? Up to 50%.
Exactly. Up to 50%. Which, when you compare it to how things apparently used to be, it's a really stark difference.
How different are we talking?
Well, the reports suggest the old standard was much lower, like maybe around 25%. If a quarter of the video violated the rules, it was apparently likely to be removed.
Wow, okay. So doubling that acceptable violation level from 25% to 50%, that fundamentally changes the game for what kind of mixed content stays up.
It really does. Think about it. Under the old system, maybe a video that was, say, 30 or 40% misinformation or hate speech would probably go.
Right.
Now, if it's under that 50% mark, it potentially could stay. Doesn't mean they want it there, but the policy framework seems to allow for a lot more leeway.
So why the change? What's the reasoning given in these sources?
It seems to be framed around this idea of public interest. That's the term popping up in the report.
Public interest. Okay, so the new policy, as described, creates exceptions for videos that touch on important public discussions, even if they have rule-breaking content mixed in.
That seems to be the gist of it. And the sources list the specific areas YouTube is apparently defining as public interest. Things like,
Let me guess.
elections. Elections, yeah. Social movements, race, gender, immigration, the really big, often contentious topics.
Right, the stuff people are actively debating.
Yeah.
So the directive to the moderators, the people actually reviewing this content, what's changed for them?
The sources suggest they're being told to lean towards keeping content online, especially if it relates to these topics. It's described as balancing freedom of expression against potential harm, but with maybe a thumb on the scale for expression in these areas.
Is YouTube saying anything officially about this?
Yeah, the reports quote a spokesperson, Nicole Bell. She apparently said, "Our goal remains the same, to protect freedom of expression on YouTube while limiting egregious harm."
Okay, egregious harm. That word feels important.
It does. And Bell also reportedly explained that they're updating policies because public discussions change, societal issues evolve. The idea is that the definition of public interest isn't static.
So they see it as adapting to how people are talking online now, trying to keep pace with the conversation.
That seems to be their public position, according to these sources, reevaluating boundaries as conversations shift.
Okay, this is where it gets really concrete because the sources apparently give specific examples of videos that stayed up because of this new policy. That helps make sense of it all.
Exactly. These examples are key. The first one mentioned is a video that falsely claimed COVID vaccines change your DNA.
Okay, that sounds like pretty clear medical misinformation. Usually that's a no-go, right?
You'd think so. It typically violates their policies. But according to the reports, this video was allowed to remain online.
Why? What was the justification cited?
Because the video also contained news clips and some political commentary about the pandemic. And the sources note it apparently didn't explicitly tell people not to get vaccinated.
So even though it had this, pretty dangerous false claim, because it was mixed with other stuff deemed news or commentary on a public interest topic, it got a pass under this new 50% rule.
That's what the report suggests, yeah. It highlights how the mix of content, the context, is now apparently crucial. It's not just if there's a violation, but how much and what else is in the video.
That's a really important distinction. It puts a lot more pressure on the viewer to sort things out.
Definitely. And there's another example in the sources, a video that apparently used a transphobic slur.
Again, hate speech.
Yeah.
That's usually a clear violation.
Right. But this video also reportedly stayed up, the reason given in the sources.
Let me guess. It was part of a discussion about something else.
Exactly. It was deemed part of a broader discussion about government hearings.
So a slur, clear hate speech, can potentially stay if the overall topic of the video falls under that public interest umbrella, like government activity.
That appears to be the implication based on the sources. The topic provides a kind of shield, allowing violating content to remain as long as it doesn't cross that 50% threshold.
Wow. These examples really drive home how this policy could play out. Content that breaks specific rules might still stay visible if it's packaged correctly, touching on these defined public interest themes.
It adds a huge layer of complexity, for sure, for the moderators applying the rules and for users trying to figure out what's reliable.
Now, the sources also mentioned this isn't just a YouTube thing, right? This is part of a bigger picture.
That's a really important piece of context, yeah. The reports place this move within a wider trend. Other big platforms are mentioned.
Like who?
Meta, so Facebook and Instagram and X, formerly Twitter. The sources say they've also reportedly adjusted or maybe pulled back on their content moderation efforts recently.
And is there a reason suggested for this broader trend?
Well, the sources connect it pretty directly to political pressure. They talk about longstanding pressure, especially from conservatives arguing that platforms were censoring them.
The censorship claims.
Yeah, and the report suggests this pressure really ramped up around and after the 2020 U.S. election cycle, and with Donald Trump being very vocal about it.
So the narrative in the sources is that platforms face these heavy accusations of bias.
Right, particularly bias against conservative views. And the implication is that these policy shifts, this easing of moderation across different platforms, might be, partly at least, a reaction to that political heat, an attempt to appear more neutral or hands-off.
Okay, so we have YouTube's stated reason adapting to public discourse, protecting expression, and then this backdrop of political pressure pushing for less moderation. What about the other side, the critics? What concerns are being raised in these materials?
Oh, there are definitely concerns being voiced, according to the sources, content safety researchers, advocacy groups. They're reportedly quite alarmed.
What's their main worry?
It's pretty straightforward.
Well,
They fear that allowing more violating content to stay up, especially on sensitive topics, will inevitably lead to more misinformation and more hate speech spreading on the platform. They see it as weakening the guardrails.
makes sense. If the threshold is higher, more bad stuff gets through.
Exactly. And some critics, according to the reports, are skeptical about the stated motivations. They question if it's really all about free speech principles.
What do they think it's about then?
The sources mention two main alternative drivers: cost-cutting and engagement. Moderation is incredibly expensive, requires lots of people, complex tech.
Right, it's a huge operational cost.
So easing the rules could reduce that burden. And then there's the engagement argument. Controversial stuff, even harmful stuff, often gets a lot of clicks, shares, views.
Drives traffic, basically. Which is good for the platform's bottom line, even if the content itself is problematic. That's the cynical take presented.
That's the more critical perspective outlined in the sources, yes. And there's another layer of concern they raise tied to the timing of these changes.
Timing. How so?
It's happening just as artificial intelligence is making it way easier and cheaper to create fake content. Really convincing fake content.
The AI factor.
Yeah.
Deepfakes. AI-written articles that sound human.
All of it. Critics point out that easing moderation rules now, when AI can flood the zone with sophisticated disinformation produced by anyone from state actors to individuals, well, it feels particularly risky.
Especially, I guess, if the content touches on those public interest topics like elections.
Precisely. The sources even mention warnings from national security folks about foreign governments using AI-generated content to try and influence elections, including in the U.S. So critics see it as lowering the defenses just as the attacks are getting potentially way more powerful and harder to spot.
Okay, so let's try to bring these threads together. synthesizing what the sources are telling us.
You've got YouTube saying essentially, we're adapting to how people talk now, focusing on public interest, balancing expression and harm, with Nicole Bell quoted saying they're updating guidelines for these exceptions based on new types of discussion.
Right, that's their frame.
But then you have the critics saying, hold on, this looks like it will amplify harm. Maybe it's really about saving money or boosting engagement, and it's happening at the worst possible time because of AI and political pressures.
All playing out on these massive platforms that are, let's face it, where tons of people get their news and information.
Exactly. Which brings us right back to why digging into these policy details actually matters for you listening right now.
Because the information you see, the videos recommended to you, the arguments you encounter, even the stuff you don't see because it was removed, it's all shaped by these decisions. These rules, like that 50% threshold, they act like an invisible filter on your information diet.
Yeah, understanding that filter gives you crucial context. And it really highlights the immense challenge these platforms face. It's this constant juggle,
Free expression versus safety.
responding to political heat versus sticking to principles,
Keeping up with technology like AI, which changes everything.
managing costs versus investing in safety. It's incredibly complex.
And where they decide to draw the line, like shifting from 25% to 50% tolerance for violations, in certain cases, that specific choice has huge downstream effects on what billions of people see and believe.
It really does.
So here's maybe the final thought to chew on, pulling from everything these sources suggest. With all this pressure on platforms, with AI making disinformation easier than ever, and with this reported policy shift towards allowing more problematic content if it's framed as public interest,
Yeah.
what does that mean for the information landscape you navigate going forward? How might it continue to evolve?
And maybe more importantly, what's your role in navigating it? How crucial does your own critical thinking, your media literacy become when the lines drawn by the platforms themselves seem to be shifting?